come on into the sanctuary. We're going to transition to our program this afternoon. And as you can see on the screen, we have a QR code. And we just want to invite everybody to come on in and scan the QR code so you can take the questionnaire survey on the myths of homelessness. So as you feel the Spirit move upon you, please come on into the sanctuary and have a seat so that you can scan this QR code and take this questionnaire on homelessness. Thank you. We want to just continue to invite everybody to come into the sanctuary as we begin our program. Welcome to the Northern California Conference First Annual Summit on Ending Homeless Initiative. My name is Tawan, and if you would be so kind to stand with me as we open up in prayer. Let us pray. We thank you, most kind, gracious Heavenly Father, for allowing us to come into your sanctuary and discuss very important, spiritual, relevant material, and to educate everyone that is present here today, Lord. Continue to be with this program as we talk about very critical and important information about homelessness. We love you, Lord, and we thank you for hearing and answering our prayer in advance. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good afternoon. I like a little responsiveness. That's great. Welcome to the Northern California Conference of Seventh-day Adventists' first annual summit on homelessness. Thank you all so much for being here today. I want to invite with you to envision with me that this space is a table. Some of you here today have joined this table out of curiosity. Others have pulled up your favorite chair to offer support. Some have come with eagerness to learn more, and some have come to the table with doubts. For whatever reason you find yourself here today, I am grateful for your participation and willingness to be part of this collective conversation. Because together we offer so much more. Welcome to our table. Today we are going to give you context for what we as a conference have done in the past few years with the Homelessness Initiative, where we are now, and the future we believe God is leading us in. In the end, we hope you walk away with new insight, better understanding, and dreaming of the possibilities. But first, I would like to start with a little bit about myself. In the years leading up to the campfire of 2018, I found myself wrestling with how to live out the command of James 1:27 to care for orphans and widows. As I would walk by the unhoused, my heart would ache with the pain that I saw, yet my grasp of how to help was so limited. Prayers that were offered up then as how to help in a more meaningful way would start to be answered, but not in the ways I could have anticipated. 6 years ago, on November 8, 2018, I found myself in a set of circumstances outside of my control, literally on my doorstep, that catapulted my family into a category I never anticipated being myself, unhoused. For the next 10 months, our family would wrestle with what it looked like to not have the familiarity and comfort of returning to a place of safety and stability that we had known previously. And over the next 5 years, my understanding of being unhoused would continue to deepen as I worked alongside my community to help it rebuild. Within that time frame, God began placing a vision on the Northern California Conference's heart to focus on community relevance and making a tangible impact on homelessness within our territory. Our two paths merged in the fall of 2023 as I stepped into the role of Ending Homelessness Initiative Coordinator, not understanding then that my family's personal experience with being unhoused would open up new levels of understanding and ignite a passion within me to provide for others what at one time I could not provide for my own family, a stable place to lie their heads down each night. Again, thank you for being here today. Now I would like to invite our conference president, Mark Woodson, up to share more in depth where the Ending Homeless Initiative originated and some of the steps we have taken so far. This is turning the slide.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I'll let you work with that. Good afternoon. So good to see you here. And let's, first of all, I just want to give Joelle here a hand, because we're glad to have her as our initiative coordinator for this. And I just want to just give you kind of a brief perspective here as it relates to this initiative. It was certainly a godsend. I won't go into all of the details on how we got here, except for by the time we got to our constituency meeting in 2022, if any of you were delegates, you heard me share this great vision. And as we talked about ending homelessness significantly reducing homelessness in our territory where we're present, I think there were some there who thought that we had lost our minds on this. And a few have actually told me that they think we've lost our minds. And so, but that's okay. But there were a lot of questions that were being asked even on that day. And what was so warming to my heart was that during the question, we have as part of our constituency, a question and answer period that you can just talk about anything you'd like to. And it was so great that this was the first, and I've done many of these constituency sessions, this was the first of the constituency sessions where it was taken over by the discussion of how we're going to end homelessness. And it created a wonderful spirit in that constituency session that I will never forget. It turned into a time where we could really glorify God and say, what can we do as a people of God to be the hands and the feet of Jesus? So one of those questions was, how are we going to do that? And most pastors don't like to answer, and of course that's my background. Most pastors never like to answer with this answer, I do not know. But that's what we were. We were saying we don't know, but we know that God will lead us and God will direct us. And so out of that process, there were two things that we said. We believe that God is directing us strategically in two ways. One, we need to have some kind of council on homelessness, some kind of a group that will help give us direction, that will oversee this initiative. That was one part of the first piece of this strategy. The second piece of this strategy, we said, we've got to have a point person. We've got to have one person who is not the person who's going to do all the work of ending homelessness themselves, but we need a point person that's going to coordinate, that's going to help us stay on track, that's going to do a lot of the organization work, a person that's got gifts in galvanizing and can talk and can do those things. And so we did set out on a process in 2023 to do both of those things. And so the first thing we did was to create a council on homelessness. And this council is actually made up of a number of different individuals that are part of our conference. It's made up of pastors. It's made up of members of our church that have different backgrounds, whether they have already been in civic work or they have been in educational work or just different varied backgrounds. And we even wanted individuals not only in social work, but also individuals that had actually experienced homelessness as part of this council. And in this council, it wasn't your typical conference committee where we're saying, hey, let's identify some individuals, let's vote them in, and let's hope that they'll serve. Instead, we did something a little bit different. We asked individuals to actually apply to be on this council. It is a 2-year term that they can serve, and we wanted individuals that were particularly interested in helping us to make this vision become a reality. And so they had to apply, they filled out an application, and we went through the process, and we had numbers of individuals that applied to be a part of this, which really warmed my heart, because that means we had that kind of interest to be able to move forward. And then once that happened, we had our executive committee then to finalize and select those individuals that are part of the council. And the way that the term of reference is for this council, it is made up of all of those individuals I mentioned, as well as some ex officio members from the conference. And because we wanted to take this very seriously, we made the chair of the council the president of the conference. So it wasn't seen as just something on the side that we were doing, but we wanted to see it as very core to what we are working on as a conference. And so that's how this Council on Homelessness began. So that was the first piece of this. I'll share with you what those names are in just a minute. And then secondly, we said, we've got to find a coordinator. We've got to work on that. So we put together a job description for what we wanted that coordinator to be. And we placed that on our website. And again, we got quite a few applications for this. By the way, this is not a volunteer position. This is a full-time paid position with connected to the conference office, overseen by the Office of the President. And so we went through that process, and without going to all the details of that, we believe that through prayer and seeking God, that we got just the right person for this position, and that is Joelle Chinnock. And you've heard a little bit of her story, and we have been blessed as she has been serving now in this position a little over a year, and it's been great. So the next, I don't know if I need to advance. Do I just hit the arrow maybe? Let's see. There it is. Okay. And I'm going to look back here. These are all the members who are on our council, and I think most of them are here today. And as I come to your name, I want you to stand. Of course, the first person is yours truly, Mark Woodson, who serves as the council chair. And then we have our coordinator as the secretary, and that's Joelle Chinnock. And if you wouldn't mind standing, Joelle. And then our executive secretary. So our officers who are part of our conference are automatically they're ex officio members. Jose Marin, our executive secretary. I didn't see Jose yet. He's probably on his way. James Lim, who is our Adventist Community Services Director, is here. And would you just stand as a member of the council as well? Remain standing so people can see you. And then our treasurer, Elder John Rasmussen, is on our council as well, because these things take resources, and we wanted him to be at the table with us thinking about these things. We wanted to have our Director of Urban Ministries as a part of our council as well, and that is Dr. Rudy Peters. He is here as well. And then in addition, we can see how outreach and church growth is part of this, and so we wanted Kevin Roberts, our church growth and evangelism director, to be a part of this. I don't think I've seen him yet. John Sissel, who is a part of us as assistant to the president, he is here. And you're going to hear from some of these individuals a little bit later. Patty Osborne, who is our associate superintendent in the education department. She represents education, and we wanted an educational background to this, and she is here as well. Thank you, Patty, for your service. Representing a pastoral position is my good friend, Pastor Robert Kurtz. He is here. He pastors, I almost gave you the wrong church, and the name of your church blanked my mind, so I'm not going to say anything. St. Helena, that's it. Okay, it finally came back to me as I saw your face. And then we have a member who is involved in homeless ministries at his church, Daryl Johnson, who has experience not only as a social worker, but also a shared experience as one who's actually had experience with homelessness. And so we appreciate you, Brother Johnson, on this. We have also another educator, and that's Pam Ditto, who is a retired criminal educator, and she is here in the back. Thank you, Pam. And these individuals, really, they serve us well, and they bring such great insights to us. We also, and then we have Tawan Usuri, who is a professor at our Pacific Union College in the area of social work. But not only is he a professor, he also is running a, and I want to say through, which church is that through? Is it through the college? Is it through the college church? He runs a homeless ministry that involves students and church members there at the college. So he is doing both of those things, and he is part of us. Just recently, a person who's come to our committee is Tyson Page, who is here. I just saw him walk in. He is a prosecutor. He works in the DA's office for the county, for Placer County, and we appreciate that. A law perspective, which you will see as we have this discussion, there are a lot of legal issues as it relates to homelessness as well, and people who are unhoused. We have Stefan Heisler. Stefan is a housing manager for the city of Rancho Cordova. So his full-time job is this, and we're glad. He's another recent person who is on our council and brings to us that background, and we're very happy to have him. This is a name that you would recognize. I don't see him yet, but Dr. Ricardo Graham, who is former NCC president of our conference and who is also retired, coming from the union as our president. And when he applied, he said, I don't know a lot about this, but I'm very passionate about seeing something happen in this area. And we said, that's what we need. We need someone like you. And so he's part of that. And then C. Moore Morgan, who is a member of the Sacramento Central Church, is also part of us. He's a retired member, but he is in the area of counseling. And so these are the members who are now on our Council of Homelessness. And would you mind just giving them a hand as they're standing, because we really appreciate the work that they are able to do. You may be seated. Thank you so much for this. So this is the kind of thing that gets us excited, because you can see the number of people who are passionate about this, who want to see things happen. And by God's grace, you're going to hear some of the things that we've been working on and how we're working together to see this vision become a reality. And so just as I am ready to sit down, I think our next section is going to be our theological and philosophical perspective that we have worked on as a council. And I'm going to invite Pastor Dr. Robert Kurtz to come at this time and share with us our theological and philosophical perspective on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Yes, we have a slide? I do this? Okay, I hope I don't do this wrong. Hey, there it is. Awesome. Let me catch up with my notes here. There we go. What do we have? Okay. Let's just read through it together. Can you see this okay? Yes. Okay, excellent. Inspired by the teachings and ministry of Jesus Christ, who prioritized caring for the marginalized and vulnerable, the Seventh-day Adventist Church recognizes the intrinsic worth and dignity of every individual, including those experiencing homelessness. Thus, working to help end homelessness aligns with the core values of compassion, service, and social justice embedded in Adventist theology. By actively engaging in efforts to reduce the effects of homelessness within our communities, the church demonstrates its commitment to fulfilling the biblical mandate to love one's neighbor as oneself. This involves not only providing immediate material assistance, such as food, shelter, and clothing, but also advocating for systemic change to address the root causes of homelessness, including poverty and the lack of affordable housing. Let's see, moreover, helping to mitigate homelessness allows the church to embody its mission of holistic ministry, addressing not only the physical needs of individuals, but also their spiritual and emotional well-being. Christ met people's real needs, and only his method will bring true success in gospel ministry. Through outreach programs, counseling services, and community partnerships, the church also can offer holistic support to individuals experiencing homelessness, helping them to regain stability and dignity. In the Northern California Conference territory, where homelessness may be particularly prevalent, we have a unique opportunity to make a significant impact on the lives of those in need. By mobilizing its resources, volunteers, schools, congregations, and other ministries, the conference can serve as a beacon of hope and compassion in its communities, reflecting God's love to all people, regardless of their social or economic status. Now, in that tiny print below is where that all comes from. It seems funny to have such a practical problem that is actually in our face every time we just go through a city or go near a freeway on-ramp or anything. We see tents and sleeping bags and shopping carts. And that gets us at a very deep emotional level, but it doesn't get us all the same. In fact, very many people that we share our society with they're moved to disgust. Do you think that's hard to believe? But we, having had our stony hearts replaced with hearts of flesh, with soft hearts, are moved to compassion. This is gospel ministry. In a shorter version of our philosophy, to use a cliche that has become really popular among teachers for the last few years, this is remembering our why. Isaiah 58, verses 6 to 7, is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressor free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry? Now underscore this next phrase. And to provide the poor wanderer with shelter. When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. In John 17, when Jesus was praying while he was at the table eating the last time with his disciples before he went to the garden and then the cross, his prayer to the Heavenly Father was, I pray that they might be one. And then he prayed in the second half, starting with verse 20, he prayed that all those people that would be responding to the message that his disciples would carry to the world would also be one, completely one. So when you see somebody with a shopping cart and a tarp and a torn up tent, that's you. That's me. We have to remember our why. And we have to recall that the Seventh-day Adventist Church has been called at periods in its history to fill a niche that is not being filled. When I was a brand new Adventist, I was 10 when I turned Adventist, and just not quite a year later at Sacramento Central Church, they had a sign-up sheet for people who'd be willing to work the temperance booth at Cal Expo at the State Fair. I didn't know what a temperance booth was, but being 10 years old and passionate, I put my name in all the time slots. They explained to me later that they'd have to have just a few of those slots back so other members could work that booth. But I'm telling you, I got half of those shifts. I was at the fair, the whole fair. And Smoking Sam and I smoked a pack of cigarettes every day. Remember Smoking Sam? Those were good old days. Sacramento Central had massive 5-day plans. They had Alberta Lamerdine leading out, and they had an army of excellent physicians that teamed up with her and with the pastoral staff. And I remember it happened on the same nights that we had Pathfinders, so we'd see in the Camellia Room, there'd be hordes of people. The parking lot was full like it was a church event. But these were not Adventists. We had a niche that no one else had. And we were good for decades to be the people you went to when you wanted to stop smoking. Celebrities made videos for us and testimonials. We were the ones. And you know, I remember hearing people say, even back then in 1972 and 73, I remember people saying, we should just get down to our actual message, preaching our teachings, and not be fooling around with this stuff that we should leave to others. I don't think there's anybody here that would argue that we were doing exactly what we were supposed to do with our 5-day plans and then Stoy Proctor's enhancement, those breathe-free plans. Anyone here ever helped to conduct a breathe-free plans? Oh, I did probably 20 or 30 breathe-free plans. And people stopped smoking. We did what we were supposed to do then. We had a niche that wasn't getting filled like we filled it. But that time has passed for us. We are no longer the place to go to stop smoking. But I think we could become the people who are the ones who make the most difference in our country. To put people in decent housing. And we can remember our why.
I am pleased to be joined today by one of our council's newest members, Stefan Heisler, who is the housing manager of the city of Rancho Cordova. The imprint he has already made on myself and this initiative will continue to have ripple effects far into the future, and we are grateful for him lending his voice, his experiences, and expertise to this conversation. I do have to share with you a brief story of how our paths crossed as an example of how God has been opening doors through this process. In my new role, I have been blessed to participate in numerous continuums of care around our conference. And in one particular time, I zoomed in with my identification saying that I was from the Paradise Adventist Church. He private messaged me saying that his in-laws attended my church. So out of curiosity, it led me to reach out and connect with him offline, where I learned more about where God has him serving currently and his passion for the unhoused. To me, this highlights the possible connections that can be made by being present in the spaces where addressing homelessness is happening. Stefan's going to share with us today more about the Built for Zero movement and community solutions.
All right, thanks, Joelle. Okay, now I'm not sure how to get to that link. You might have to help me. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. As Joelle mentioned, I'm Stefan Heisler, the housing manager for the city of Rancho Cordova. I'm sort of one of those rare breed of Adventist bureaucrats, and so it has been, I didn't expect to tear up, but it's been sort of a work. I've been working in the public sector for about 10 years now, and it is so exciting to see our denomination getting involved in this work as well. And I'm really pleased to be part of it. Sorry. Better click that video. Sorry, if you could pause it, just pause it for 1 second though. Let me give a quick introduction. One of the really key focuses of our Ending Homelessness initiative is sort of adopting the Community Solutions Built for Zero model. So you're going to hear a little bit in this video about the Built for Zero model, and I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of our experience, there's sort of counties and jurisdictions who have adopted this Built for Zero model already in our conference, and so I'll sort of share a little bit of the experience with that, sort of as it kind of relates to what we'll be doing through this initiative, kind of adopting this model and trying to utilize that, implement that across the conferences. So go ahead, thank you. Go ahead and hit play.
Solved homelessness, a world where when an emergency arises, a person can get the support they need to remain in housing. And if they ever lose their home, they are moved into housing quickly by a system that knows them and what they need. Homelessness is rare, brief when it happens, and never becomes a way of life. The truth is, we don't have to just imagine it. In the Gulf Coast region of Mississippi, any veteran who becomes homeless is connected to housing within 30 days of identification. No one's left behind. And they aren't the only ones. Across the country, communities in Built for Zero are proving that homelessness is solvable. They do it by shifting their methodology and their mindset. First, they build a single team that is accountable for ending homelessness across the community. Who's responsible for ending homelessness in your community? The truth is, many stakeholders hold a piece of the solution, but no one has their eye on how the pieces fit together. In Built for Zero communities, everyone who serves the population works together to align their collective efforts behind a shared goal. Second, they commit to a shared aim of ending homelessness. Often, success for those working on homelessness is defined by how their individual programs perform. Built for Zero communities measure progress by whether they are collectively driving down the number of people experiencing homelessness. Their goal is to reach functional zero, a dynamic milestone that ensures homelessness stays rare and brief. Are fewer people experiencing homelessness than can be routinely housed? Once they reach functional zero for veterans or people experiencing chronic homelessness, they work to sustain it and scale that learning to the next population, until their systems are built to end homelessness for all. Third, they know everyone experiencing homelessness by name and in real time. You can't solve a problem that you can't see, and homelessness is a dynamic problem that is constantly changing. But it's often tracked using an annual anonymous street count, which is just a snapshot. To end homelessness, a community needs a video. Built for Zero communities maintain by-name data on who's experiencing homelessness in real time. They understand not only every individual's needs, but the dynamics of the population as a whole. They know who is entering homelessness, who is actively experiencing it, and who is exiting it. That way, they can target where systems can be improved, test new ideas, and track whether their efforts are actually driving numbers down. Finally, they make data-driven targeted investments. Expanding housing resources is crucial, but many cities have dramatically done so without making a dent in homelessness. The reason? They never fixed the housing system. Real-time data enables communities to secure and target housing resources to drive the greatest possible reductions in homelessness. Homelessness is a big and complex problem, but it's not too big or complex to be solved. While it affects those who experience it in the deepest way, it affects less than 1% of the population. Communities can build systems that continually eliminate it and ensure everyone has a place to call home and live with dignity. We can take steps together toward a future where homelessness being rare and brief is the norm, not the exception. Is your community a part of it?
All right, thank you. So in that video, you heard, maybe for the first time, a bit about the Built for Zero model. So I know that was probably a lot of information. You can kind of see the key components of the Built for Zero model here on the slide. But I'll just talk for a brief minute about Community Solutions, sort of where this sort of model comes from. Community Solutions is a nationwide nonprofit, and they are working with about 140 plus jurisdictions across the country to help sort of adopt this model and then use that as sort of their focus, their lens to get to a functional zero level of homelessness in their community. We have several examples here in California, sort of a range of different, sort of the whole spectrum of sort of between success and still reaching for success. So I can share with you a little bit about the experience that we've had in Sacramento County. I'd say one really good example, not Sacramento County, is Bakersfield. And they have actually adopted the model and been able to get to a functional level of zero for their chronic homeless population. In Sacramento County, we adopted the Built for Zero model in 2015. And that was really led by the city and the county of Sacramento. I work for Rancho Cordova, but I think at the time the leaders of those jurisdictions are really hoping that that would be sort of, we adopt it, we can use this as sort of our platform, our model to get everybody on board and then kind of focus our efforts towards ending homelessness or getting to that functional zero. As things happen, leaders kind of transition and things kind of happen and new opportunities come our way. The model has maybe not taken off quite as well as people had hoped at that time. To make it sort of the central cornerstone piece of our strategy, but it is still definitely in the mix. And I want to kind of bring that up. It's still absolutely relevant to what we're doing and as sort of adopting that as part of our initiative because it is language that folks know or they will become aware of, or it's very common to see that model being used across jurisdictions. So it is a very relevant model, and I think these components and these key changes absolutely are still valid and relevant. If we had been able to focus our efforts around these key changes, I think we definitely could have seen shifts. But it's also not necessarily the only model out there. So we've been doing a lot of work, as you may know, in Sacramento. We've been putting a lot of resources towards ending homelessness and getting a lot of people off the streets, and kind of only recently seeing our numbers start to decrease. But the Community Solutions model, Built for Zero model, I think could be a very effective tool for our initiative to use as we go across the conference. So that was just a few words, I think. Am I handing it back to you, Joelle? We're kind of tag teaming this part.
We are.
All right.
Great. If we could go ahead and pull up the functional zero video, that would be great. Thank you.
Can you imagine what solving homelessness would look like in your community? How would you know if your city was making or sustaining progress? Solving homelessness is complex and only possible if everyone is working together toward a shared reality. That's why defining the goal and how to measure it is the first step. But getting clear on what it looks like to end homelessness is also a challenge. People, politicians, and practitioners define it differently every day. Ending homelessness isn't about making the problem less visible. It isn't a one-time achievement. It isn't an aspirational but unachievable feat. It is the hard work of creating a new reality, a more equitable one where homelessness remains rare and brief. Across the country, communities in the Built for Zero movement are solving homelessness for specific populations with the aim of ending it for all people. They use functional zero as a measure of whether they're achieving these goals. There are 4 important components of what it means to achieve functional zero. Functional zero means homelessness across a population is rare, and measurably so. In this state, fewer people are experiencing homelessness than are routinely accessing safe and stable permanent housing in a month. In other words, the number of people experiencing homelessness at any given time is never exceeding the community's capacity to ensure positive exits. Functional zero also means cities and counties are operating off of a full accounting of homelessness at all times by maintaining quality, real-time, comprehensive data on who is experiencing it. By achieving this milestone, the community is working toward equitable systems, starting with a focus on race and ethnicity. Any system that is not designed to identify and respond to disparities risks perpetuating them. Finally, all of these achievements are sustained over time, even as local conditions change. Communities reach functional zero once, and they must keep reaching it over and over again as they work toward an end to homelessness for all. Countless forces, like an economic crisis, a natural disaster, or a pandemic, can increase the likelihood of housing crises. But by achieving functional zero, communities are developing resilient systems that consistently respond and reduce homelessness towards zero. Achieving functional zero is a critical step toward an equitable future where homelessness is never inevitable, inescapable, or a way of life.
So I know we've shown a couple of videos already, and still the concept to me, I'm still learning. But what we're trying to show you here today is that Built for Zero is a movement that we at the conference are wanting to align with. And we're showing you also some terminology so that when we get to our goal of what we've adopted at the Council on Homelessness, hopefully you'll understand what the goal is better by defining some of these terms. So as you saw in the video, the terminology functional zero is a metric that's achievable. Like Stefan said, Bakersfield has achieved this functional zero metric for their chronic homelessness population. There are 4 components that are required for functional zero. And as you'll see up there on the screen, I'm not going to read all of it, but one of them is that homelessness is rare and brief. The second one is that cities and counties are operating on a full accounting of homelessness at all times. This means that they know the actual people in their communities and what they're experiencing and can network across different collaborational spaces. Different nonprofits working together know the individuals that are experiencing homelessness in that area. And they're trying to achieve this by having equitable systems so they don't repeat disparities. And then these systems must be maintained over time. So I know this is a lot of big terminology, and I'm going to try to explain it in the way that seems simpler to me. What I understand that the community solution model does is it comes into a space, a jurisdiction, and it allows for cross-collaboration to happen. It increases the web of connectivity between different organizations in a geographic area that are helping to solve homelessness. So all the different homeless nonprofit operations then learn how to talk to each other better and learn how to work better together. So it's creating that web. So as an individual enters into homelessness, they've now entered into a web of much more connectivity, so they're less likely to fall through the cracks, and they're also more likely to move through the spaces quicker. That's also where the brief terminology comes in. And one of the things that Built for Zero movement does is they will oftentimes focus on one population group at a time to achieve that metric before moving on to another population group. So in my mind, as I visualize it, I'm looking at a wheel, like a hamster wheel. When the Built for Zero movement comes into an area, it gets that wheel going. So the organizations that are helping to work on, for instance, solving maybe chronic homelessness or veterans homelessness, those organizations are more primed and more present on that wheel. And as individuals come in that are identified as a veteran or chronic or whatever the population group is, they are channeled through that connectivity at a better rate had those organizations not been working together. And as that wheel gets going, it's able to drive down the overall numbers of that population experiencing homelessness. I think the goal that Built for Zero then has is that as it's gotten that first wheel going, it will then stand up another wheel to get the next population group going. So overall, the population of people experiencing homelessness will continue to decrease, but they start focusing on one population group at a time. That's how it makes a little more sense to me. I hope that's more understandable here. There is some terminology I'm learning as well in this space, and while functional zero is the ultimate goal, there are steps along the way that help us achieve that. A downward shift, I am going to read this because this is still something I'm learning as we go. A downward shift is a measurable, impactful reduction in homelessness for a community. The community has consistently driven the number of people experiencing homelessness below their median for 6 months. A shift in the median indicates that there has been a fundamental sustained change in the level at which the system operates. It's something to be applauded and indicates the community's homeless response system is on track and it's gaining momentum. This I found interesting because as we'll talk a little bit later about the counties currently in Northern California that are part of the Built for Zero movement, you'll see that those counties are starting to achieve some of this downward shift momentum. Stefan's going to share with us a little bit more about the different population groups.
Okay, so on the slide you can see sort of the common subpopulation groups that are typically addressed in the Built for Zero model, but oftentimes in each sort of community's continuum of care or just their homeless response system. So these are categories which are pretty broadly applicable to our homeless populations. It's pretty easy to get folks into one or more of these buckets, and they're pretty easy to identify and ask on a survey or be able to observe. So they're very common terms that are sort of broadly applicable across the country. As Joelle mentioned, sort of that momentum piece, I think with the Built for Zero model, a lot of jurisdictions will start with one of their smaller subpopulations and knock that out first and use that more momentum and success to roll into success for the next one. So oftentimes that might be veterans, that might be youth, that might be families. And I think I've got, so one example here locally that I was a part of in the city of Rancho Cordova, we were working on sort of our veterans' homelessness. We had an opportunity to, a lot of support for helping create permanent housing for homeless and disabled veterans. So this was a project that we actually began in 2009. And as I mentioned, Sacramento County adopted Built for Zero in 2015, and then we finished it, as you can see on the slide, in 2019. So it took sort of a long period of time to actually complete the whole project. But what it is 100 units of permanent supportive housing, and I know I'm using some technical terms there, but just to expose you to those terms now, we can get to definitions sort of later, but it's permanent housing with supportive services. So we've got 100 units of those, and then 46 units of transitional housing. So that's sort of temporary housing up to 2 years to help people get used to living out, or sort of get used to living indoors and getting supportive services to get them over to permanent housing. And the location for this project is really critical. We're actually just 2 blocks away from our VA healthcare hospital in Northern California. So folks can just walk across the street to get mental health services or other healthcare services from their VA. So that was a really great project. But again, it took us 10 years to do that. Effectively, we could say, and I think we kind of do kind of quietly, that this project in Rancho Cordova sort of ended or got us to functional zero for veterans homelessness within our city. But really our city is just a piece of Sacramento County, and really the whole county's homeless population is sort of shared across all the jurisdictions. So we aren't there yet for the county, but we do kind of like to wave our flag a little bit and say we got there for the city.
Now you understand why we're so grateful to have him on our council. So now that we've talked about some of this terminology, I think you can understand when we get here to what our goal is. Some of the terms will be defined for you. So at our first council meeting back in 2023, we assigned our goal for the conference for the next 10 years. And it's to achieve and maintain functional zero for at least one population group. And we have the definition of functional zero now. We know what a population group. And we want to do that per county or area where the Adventist Church is present within our Northern California Conference territory by the year 2032. There's about 31 or 32 counties in Northern California within our jurisdiction, and we're roughly present in about 28 or 29 of those, just to give you a little context. Currently, the Built for Zero movement is present in 6 of the Northern California counties. They're present in Contra Costa, Marin, Nevada, Sacramento, Sonoma, and Placer. You will see this is, we do have a website, a portion on our website at the conference level is dedicated to our new Ending Homelessness initiative. I believe we'll be talking a little bit more about that later, but in case you wanted to check it out, we do have some information on there, and we will continue to keep updating it as we go through this process. I'm now going to invite John Sissel up with me. Right? Yeah. Thank you, Stefan. John and I are going to talk with you about the next steps that we are taking for the conference as we start to see moving forward. Our Ending Homelessness Initiative Task Force is we are asking that we will be, what the goal here is that we'll be creating task force units throughout the different counties in Northern California to start addressing homelessness in that geographic area. And what the request is going to be that we'll have 1 or 2 members, representatives from each of the church or congregations or schools within that territory, that they will meet monthly as the schedule allows. They will elect a leader and a secretary within that group. One of them or multiple of them within that group will attend the local continuum of care to start connecting with the local efforts, working collaboratively and in partnership with the local efforts to create housing opportunities, and oversight and support provided by myself. We have started a pilot task force unit, which is currently in Placer County. Placer County is already part of the Built for Zero movement. They are one of the 6 in Northern California where we are present. And so we've been meeting for about 3 months now, and I invited John to come up here and talk with us about it. He's been part of the Placer County Task Force. He resides in Placer County himself. The conference office is in there. And I just wanted to have him give his perspective of what we've been doing in that space and what it looks like moving forward.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So I started here working with Elder Woodson in the Northern California Conference for my second tour of duty in July 1, 2024, so not very long ago. And one of the first things that Elder Woodson said is, hey, there's this Ending Homelessness Task Force I want you to be a part of. You reside in Placer County, you live in Placer County, and you work here, so I want you to be a part of this. And I thought, okay. And I joined the Ending Homelessness Initiative Task Force, and I thought, man, these are really great people here, and I thought, and it was really easy to get up to speed. And just when Joelle was asking me to share with you today, I thought, wait a minute, it started in July of 2024, and I started in July of 24, so I got it on the ground level. So I'm very grateful to be a part of it. Like Elder Woodson commented, sometimes when you hear, we're gonna end homelessness, and it sounds like you're crazy, right? And so for as a pastor, and Robert Kurtz and Robert, I have smoked many packs of cigarettes with Smoking Sam as well. So we have that in common. I volunteered in Orange County. But it's one of those things where our hearts are moved with compassion for those that we see that are suffering. And it's kind of like we almost, there's a tendency or a temptation to become numb because we see needs and we don't know what to do about it, right? And the task, the job, the burden seems so great. So that's one of the things that for me, there was an educational component to being part of the local task force in Placer County, because it helped expose me to these concepts of the community solutions, functional zero. It helped me understand that there's different populations, there's different approaches, there's a benefit to working collaboratively. Just one person cannot make that big of a change maybe by ourselves, but when we work together, then there's a change that can be made. So there was that educational component to it, and it was a great way for me to kind of get up to speed on what the Northern California Conference Initiative on Ending Homelessness is all about, and to see how it can be applied to our particular jurisdiction. But there's also another component, and that is one of connections. So it began in 2024, our particular one. We have monthly meetings, and I think at each of those monthly meetings that we've had, I've seen some of the same people there, but I've also seen different people. So we'll connect with members from different churches in this particular area. And so it's great to see like-minded people who are involved currently with some kind of homeless outreach and initiative in their own congregation, or people who have a similar passion. So it's a great place to come and connect and also be energized. We brainstorm ideas, and we've had people who are not part of a church community or a school community, but they're part of another organization within our county, within our area, and they have a passion for working on the same and collaborating with us and working on the same issues. And so that's exciting because we see that even people who may not claim to know God or have any connection with Him, but God has put on their hearts a passion for serving and for serving these populations. So that's one of the big things. We've formed, in Placer County, we've formed a partnership with the, let's see, what is it called? People of Placer. Yes, People of Placer Face Together. So that's been awesome to hear what they're doing, and they've invited us to events that they've had. Another thing, when we talked about, one of the things that was presented in some of the videos that we watched was the creation of housing, and Stefan, you shared with that in Rancho Cordova. And so one of the things that we can do as a task force is to kind of work together to identify different kinds of properties. We each have different connections with people in the community. So where are some places that we could have some housing units that would be able to be a part of the solution? So those are the really the benefits to me, not just educationally, but the connections. So I think Joel wanted to share one more thing with you about this.
So as we saw, Built for Zero is present in these counties currently: Contra Costa, Marin. Mark and I actually had the opportunity back in the spring of 2024 to attend Marin's ribbon cutting, where they did also achieve functional zero for their veteran population, although it's not been updated on the Community Solutions website yet, but it was a really great opportunity for us to go see what that looks like. So we now currently have one of the counties in Northern California that's achieved functional zero. You'll see that Nevada has had a shift. It's a downward shift in their chronic population. Sacramento County is also part of the Built for Zero movement. Sonoma County is part of it, and Placer, where we currently have a task force unit there, as well as it's achieved a shift in their veteran population since 2022. And just to give you a little bit movement moving forward, there have been some initial discussions about getting task force units started also in Butte County, Napa County, and Mendocino County, and I believe our speaker today is going to be presenting some information on Mendocino County. Stefan is going to join us back up to talk about a continuum of care.
All right, so as Joel mentioned, one of the main sort of features of our EHIT teams is going to be interfacing with the county or the jurisdiction continuum of care. So we'll talk a little bit about what that is so you have an idea, and I know that Chris and Elder Woodson and probably others in this room have already kind of become, integrated or participating with their continuum of care, so, feel free to add additional details too. I want to hear kind of what it looks like, because it always looks like a little bit different within different jurisdictions. So the continuum of care basically is a federal funding program that runs through HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. This last fiscal year, just to give you a sense, it was funded with $3.2 billion across the country. And what that translates down to is each COC gets a little share of that, a little piece of that, to then fund housing, supportive services, outreach services, healthcare services and other things, and for their homeless population to help address and get people off the street into housing, into permanent housing is the goal. There's all these kinds of sort of bureaucratic strings attached to that funding, but one of those is the creation of these groups called continuums of care. And that is sort of a jurisdiction or an entity, sometimes it's a nonprofit, that is the administrative entity for the COC, and that's usually governed by either a board of directors or a committee or an advisory board. In Sacramento County, we have an advisory board that's run through Sacramento Steps Forward, which is a nonprofit that works in the homelessness space, but is the designated administrative entity for the COC in Sacramento County. So there are a lot of stakeholders that come to the table at these COCs, ranging from housing providers, nonprofit organizations, government agencies, healthcare providers, social service agencies, and of course, faith-based organizations. Really anyone who's doing anything actively in the homelessness space is invited to participate and needs to be at the table in these COCs to really sort of help the group together. Let's see, I was just thinking I have other thoughts here. In Sacramento County, as I mentioned, it's led by a nonprofit, but on our advisory board, there's about 30 or so members. So it's very much inclusive community, trying to get everybody to the table, all of the voices of the county. We have all of these listed here. The only one I don't see mentioned is folks with lived experience. So we're always trying to get folks with lived experience who have been homeless in their lives, bringing their voice and experience to the table so that the services that we're providing are incorporating their expertise as well. So the really important piece that you here in the room may become involved with is sort of how to reach out to your continuum of care and learn more and get involved. So I think the first step, sort of very basic, is to just go on your internet, do a search for your local COC. They're usually divided by county. I don't know if do we still have the map? No, okay. So COCs are usually divided by counties. Some of the smaller population counties have maybe combined COC across a couple different counties or more. There are about, if I counted correctly, you'll have to trust me, 21 COCs across the Northern California Conference, usually, as I mentioned, by county. So go on the internet, do a search. There's usually lots of information. There's usually recordings. There may be meeting minutes and all of those kinds of information, just so you can start to get up to speed with where the conversations are at and sort of what their focus is on currently. And then attend one of their regular meetings. They're usually open to the public. I can't think of why they wouldn't be open. So please, go attend. A lot of them will frequently be virtual or on Zoom or Teams, so they're very easy to just click a button and from your living room you can be joining in. But while you're there, introduce yourself. Let people know sort of why you're there and who you are and what you're interested in getting involved with. And then also look and see sort of what are the other agencies and nonprofits that are really involved in that COC space already. Usually you'll be able to start to pinpoint who are sort of the main leaders of the COC group, who are the largest voice or the loudest voices in the room, and the ones sort of with the most sort of clout. But those are the ones that are going to be sort of the most active within your county around homelessness. So then comes finally the opportunities for involvement. So usually with a COC, because it's really focused on administering this HUD funding, it's not necessarily going to be the number one opportunity for involvement, except for that second bullet point. That's one exception. But usually, you're going to be wanting to look for opportunities to get involved with any of the partner agencies that are part of the COC. So the second point there is to volunteer for your COC's regular point-in-time count. So as you may have heard, caught in that first video, but local jurisdictions are working off a snapshot of time or of a count of their homeless in their community. And that is usually through HUD's either annual or biannual requirement to hold a point-in-time count. So everybody goes out, volunteers go out into the community to count as many unsheltered homeless and sheltered homeless people that they can find within their COC boundaries. There's a lot of challenges with that method, with those sort of requirements, which are totally recognized, but that is really like the one official number of your homeless that the program works off of. So they're always looking for additional volunteers. It's usually a cold night in January, So prepare for that, but it is an excellent idea, excellent opportunity to get involved, really to get your boots on the ground and to start sort of interacting and seeing and experiencing what the homelessness looks like in your community. And if you're really gung-ho, you can apply to maybe join a COC committee. If you have a large COC, they might break their board down into multiple different committees. In Sacramento, we have a whole lot of opportunities for committee work. Reminds me of maybe our church organization a little bit. But there's probably opportunities within your COC to join a committee of some kind. Usually they'll want to see folks with experience, so getting involved with these other organizations or through this initiative is a good way to show your experience and education and knowledge on the topic so that you're a good candidate for joining those committees. All right, now I'm turning it over to Chris. Oh, Joelle? Yeah.
Another quick intro of our guest speaker. Our guest speaker today is Chris Oberg. She is Executive Director for the Path of Life Ministries in Riverside, California. Each time I connect with Chris, I walk away inspired by her passion for the unhoused and the depth of compassion which she brings to this work. Her pivotal and literally groundbreaking work in Southern California through the Union Conference provides one path for us to follow. It is with pleasure that I invite my friend Chris to the stage to help us dream together.
Thank you, Joelle. Good afternoon. I'm so excited to just hear what y'all are doing here that I don't even want to talk now. I just want to listen to you respond to what you've been hearing. I did more than 20 years in pastoral ministry until something in my gut told me, stop this, because other people can do that. Just go take care of this other problem that you're seeing. I'll say more about that in a few minutes, but for 20 years I pastored a large congregation, La Sierra University, Southern California. Now, 2.5 years I've been with Path of Life Ministries. We are on-the-ground providers. So we are the first level of contact. We own or operate 3 emergency shelters, about 175 beds in my county. We provide the wraparound care, all of the supportive services to housed individuals. We house about 80 families with permanent housing, and the thing we're most excited about this year, 60 college students at our local community college. We're involved in a variety of initiatives, but I think the most important thing about Path of Life is it was started by a faith community. So this was a little church that had a dream to help people who were living outdoors. That little church is long gone. Let that sink. The little church is long gone, and this nonprofit thrives. We're about 85, 90 employees, and we will help about 1,300 people with services in our county this year. It's amazing work every single day. And I never know what's going to happen on any given day. So let me ask you, December 17, 1903, that is the year something important happened. December 17, 1903. Somebody in the room may be thinking, 120 years ago, what was that? 120 years ago, the Wright brothers, right? Their first flight in their airplane in Kitty Hawk. Orville and Wilbur Wright, they make their first flight on that airplane, on their 5th attempt. They fly. They succeed in a 12-second flight. Wilbur runs down to send the message home that they've had a successful airplane flight, right? And the message is, we have flown for 12 seconds, we will be home for Christmas. The family received the telegram back home in Ohio. They took it to the local newspaper because they wanted the hometown newspaper to break the story first, because the flight happened a ways from home. So they pass off the telegram to the newspaper editor. He reads the telegram where it says they flew for how many seconds? There's not a story here. If they flew for more of this, well, 2 days later, in the local newspaper, 2 days later, there was a headline, Wright Brothers Home for Christmas. This is the entire headline, Wright Brothers Home for Christmas. Now, this is the popular version of the story. But if you do a little digging with Snopes, the rumor mill fact-checking engine, Snopes will tell you the version of the story I just told you, Wright Brothers Home for Christmas, was made popular by inspirational speakers down through the decades. People like pastors. We told the story enough again and again and again that people believed that was actually the story. But if you dig under the surface, I'm going to give you a little more detail. It's the absolute right story, but it's the wrong headline. And that's what happens when Anonymous gets involved. Right story, wrong headline. What actually happened, the Wright brothers, they take off in their plane. There are several flights, as we know, because we read history. They walk 4 miles to the closest telephone line, and they send a telegraph home. And that telegraph goes, the brothers want their hometown newspaper to break the story. So far, so good. That's all truthful. When the editor receives that little telegram, it said they flew for 59 seconds. He said, that's rubbish, threw the telegram in the trash. 59 minutes, I would have printed it, but 59 seconds, I don't have anything to say. All right, that part's truthful so far. Back in Virginia, where the telegram originated, there was a snoopy somebody who hijacked that historic information. Gave it to the Associated Press. AP picked it up. So the very next day, the Associated Press absolutely ran a headline about the Wright brothers and sorted 4 other newspapers. The story sounded a little bit like this. Flying machine soars 3 miles in teeth of high wind over sand hills and waves. The mile was covered, and then Orville Wright declared that the invention was a success. But it was not until the 3rd mile had been accomplished that the inventor cast his eyes about for a suitable landing. He found it, and with his invention under utmost control, he slowly neared the earth, and he let his machine rest as easily and graciously as a bird. This account of the story that was run by AP, according to Orville Wright, is rubbish. And he used more colorful language. The account of the story, according to Orville Wright, if you want to know, we'll have to go to the U.S. Library of Congress into the archives. There's a copy of the telegram right there. Success, 4 flights, Thursday morning, all against 21-mile wind. Started from level with engine power alone. Average speed, 31 miles. Longest flight, 59 seconds. Inform press, home Christmas. When the hometown newspaper editor read the headline that Associated Press ran, he went to his trash can, picked out the message that was delivered to him, read it again, and absolutely the next day in his paper ran a headline on page 6 that said, Wright Brothers Home for Christmas. Right story, wrong headline. It is the correct story, but it is the wrong headline. That matters. The headline is, we can fly. We fly now. Oh, by the way, did you know the Wright brothers fly? That is the right headline. So what is the headline of your story this afternoon? There's a crisis epidemic of homelessness in our country, in our state, in our neighborhoods. People experiencing homelessness in California, it is out of control. 12% of the nation's population, 30%. 12% of the nation's population lives in California, but 30% of the nation's homelessness, it lives in California. 30% call California home. And of those experiencing homelessness who live outdoors in their vehicle or outdoors, 50% have that experience in our Golden State. We are the home to this. And there is no end in sight. It is expensive, it's costly, it's ugly, it's dirty, people say. It's destroying our businesses and our properties. It's ruining our economic growth and development. It's clustered in encampments which fester disease and domestic violence and drugs. And we have a crisis. It's called homelessness. This is the right story and the wrong headline. This is a chaos headline. Homelessness, oh no, it's terrible. That's a chaos headline. The author of the book Wounded Storyteller, Arthur Frank, says, you can use a chaos headline, but you'll get a chaos outcome. We can end homelessness in our region. This is a headline. We can end homelessness. We have the means, we have the methods, we have the muscle. All we need is the mindset. We can end homelessness here. What we need is the mindset to radically reduce homelessness in this region and then eventually bring it to an end. So this much Northern California Conference has right. Look at that headline, End Homelessness, on your website. That is the right story and the right headline. End homelessness in this location. Congratulations. This is a quest narrative, not a chaos narrative. And you're leading. Affordable housing experts tell us that we are on the cusp of a wave of faith communities reimagining what to do with their properties and their assets to help solve this challenge in our country. Northern California, you're leveraging your location. You have a core number of cities where rents are high, real estate is high, cost of living has increased. You have a cluster of high-density population areas where people fight at a higher level with the experience of homelessness. You have the capital city in your territory. My goodness, the seat of policy and power and funding. You have the best research available in the Benioff Homeless and Housing Initiative coming out of UCSF. They've completed the most recent study on homelessness in the state of California. It's been decades since we've had one done. This foundation also has a mission to end homelessness. They want to do it with evidence and action because they know data drives policy, right? So what is the data? They're gaining attention. You in a Northern California Conference, these are such great reasons you should leverage your location. In addition, you have many rural populations. Rural populations are now the focus of a lot of more in-depth study because we know the disparity and lack of services in these rural spaces. So as you think the rest of this afternoon and now collectively as a conference about what you're doing, what Pastor said earlier is we have to know our why. Why are we doing this initiative? The advisory has given us a theological, philosophical mission statement. I add simply one more thought to that. The theological, spiritual reasons we might do this. I have learned growing up in the church and leading churches that it's easier to talk about Jesus than to talk about what Jesus talked about. Is it okay if I say it again? She told me I didn't have to preach, but I'm going to say it again. It's easier to talk about Jesus than to talk about what Jesus talked about. It's easier to sing songs about Jesus than to care for what Jesus cared for. So what you're going through now, what you've decided to put your mind to now, this is not the easier life, it's the better life. The Matthew 5 Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, the Matthew 25, the Luke 4, any of the scriptural passages you want to reference today, that's work. So we begin with our why. To thoughtfully engage the vision of homelessness, we also take seriously our own zip codes. Your team, your leadership team, has already done a fantastic job of this. So what I say for the next 10 minutes reinforces what they've already done. We have to know our neighborhoods. The church in La Sierra, where I pastored for 18 years, we began to refer to ourselves as the church in the 92505. Still today, when I go to worship and listen, someone will pray, God, help us in the 92505. I'm like, yes. Because we worked 15 years on that language. Who lives in the 92505? Who lives 3 miles from where we worship? We have to know our neighborhoods. We have to know our zip codes. We have to know our partners. We have to know the regional priorities that the counties and the cities are setting out for us. We have to situate ourselves in this context. And I'm going to tell you, this is not always our best superpower as Adventist Christians. We're a little bit of a Lone Ranger remnant group, aren't we? Set apart, set aside, isolated for a mission and a purpose. I was born into this. I was 0 days old when I became Adventist. I was dropped off at the Portland Adventist Sanitarium by a pregnant mom and adopted into Adventism the next morning. Yeah. It turns out that we all will have this kind of a story. Joelle shared one. What is it that situates that's in our own story? But then in our community, we have to know where we live and who our partners are. So the vision requires us to be in this world and love the people God so loves in this world. We live in counties. Counties have regional leadership, as you heard earlier. So I'm going to spend a few minutes pulling data from a couple of your counties. You heard the point in time count reference. It's January 24. In just a couple of months, we'll be doing the point in time count. My agency leads this in our county. My church, your church, this place could also be one of the gathering spots for a point in time community gathering, because they need people to open their fellowship halls and put out donuts and coffee and wake up at 4:30 a.m., get the sleepy sand out, and go out and count folks, right? So the point in time count is the way we get our numbers. What we hope when we go out in the morning is that we will find people willing to engage with us. Maybe we'll offer water and a hygiene kit, and we hope they'll take our survey and be truthful. We count as many as we can count, and we always know that's a sample. Those are the numbers you work with now. That's how all of your cities and municipalities set their goals. That's how you all in your pilot projects are going to set your goals. So here's your population group here in Placer, and 702, your number on the right, that is your number. You can see you're trending down just a little bit, but if we want to know how many people are we talking about in Placer, this is our number, 702 people. In my city, the number is 943 people, by the way, and in my county, the number is over 4,000. All of that begins to matter, as Stefan was saying. These continuums of care in the counties all work a little bit different. They do because our counties are also different, and our populations are different, and we have different skill sets and priorities, and we attract different amount of funding to our regions. But you need to know that number. I have to know that number if I'm interested in this project. This is 702 people that God so dearly loves and that Jesus cares about. So the total population. Then we want to know lots of data. I'm just pulling things from, this is the point in time count from last year, almost a year ago. 52% of the people experienced homelessness for the first time last year in Placer County. Let me put some numbers to that. There were 365 days out of the year, right? 365 days out of the year, half of that, 702, every day last year, someone for the very first time was experiencing homelessness in Placer County. One person a day. We might have passed them in Trader Joe's or at Target. We might have been next to them in the playground, swinging kids at the playground, right? One person every day was experiencing homelessness for the very first time. When we have these conversations and we fill out surveys, people experiencing homelessness report, what are their other co-occurring realities? That's what we call this. I'm experiencing homelessness and something else is going on in my life. So you can learn by digging into these studies what else people are dealing with: mental health, substance use, physical disabilities. We should be very careful when we say every person who is experiencing homelessness is crazy and needs mental health. Come on, we all need mental health. So we should be very careful how we talk about this. If we want to know why the crisis in behavioral health in our country, we have to go back decades to the dismantling of this care. So I just encourage you to be very careful the way we speak about those wandering our sidewalks and living outdoors. I need mental health counseling. Dig in the numbers a little more, you can tell where people are experiencing their homelessness. You can see outdoors in tents and vehicles is the number one way people experience their homelessness in Placer County. You can also see the veterans number there. Didn't it pop out somewhere? Your veterans number isn't on that slide. I apologize for that. It's 45. Is that right? It's up at the top. Thank you. That was the veterans. 45 is your number. So if you're headed for functional zero, I'm from a city and a county that experienced that. In Riverside City and the county, we are functional zero for veterans housing. But it's because the county said so, and the mayor said so, and then the mayor called us all together and said, what are y'all going to do to help? That's how we get to functional zero. The self-reporting of by the way, the self-reporting of these co-occurring conditions, most people who are at the very bottom will tell you what's going on. So when they self-report substance and other things, we pretty much take people at their word now. I have no reason to not tell you I'm living outside. Mendocino County. So we take all that data from head counting, right? From the PIT numbers. And then the county decides, all right, what are we going to do with this? So you can read their vision and their plan and their work. In Mendocino County, what they plan to do, everyone will have access to housing that fosters dignity, safety, and wellness. Now, if a county leadership tells us that, we should take them seriously. Who among us in Adventist Christianity cares about dignity, safety, and wellness? Are they not speaking our language? So we should take them seriously. That's what they say they care about. They want to develop community-wide strategies to make homelessness rare, brief, one time. You now recognize that language. They want to invite residents to download the strategic plan, so go ahead and click the link, get an extra cup of tea or whatever it is, and keep going. This is what you can do tomorrow. Now you can read their vision. The reason this becomes important is because as you cluster together in your pilot projects, you'll start tracking with the way the region is attacking this issue. This is what they're going to fund. So we're first going to look at existing projects and see how they're performing, and then we're going to invest in new and creative housing inventory. If you keep reading, you'll find out, households with children, number 3. Anybody care about that? That's going to be a focus group in Mendocino. They care about, if you go all the way to number 5, they care about equity and justice. Big, big topic. All right, let's just click one more time with Mendocino. Here's their strategy for how they're going to make homelessness rare. They're going to source new funding opportunities for all types of inventory. Now, on the far right, they name their ongoing projects, but they're going to incentivize for developers in the region. If you are going to develop property and you will set aside some of those units for affordable housing, we're going to incentivize your development. You're going to go to the front of the line. So they're telling you right now what they plan on doing, and they're telling us right now, boy, if we can find some new ideas for building units, you're going to be our partner. We want to know this. We want to know that they're looking for our land, friends. And I have to ask, what are we doing with our land? What are we doing with the dirt God put in our hands? Think about every church and school, every academy, the conference office. Think about the union. Think about the homes we own, the trusts, the wills, the assets that are going to the trust departments in our conference offices. How much land do Adventist Christians own? In Southern California, the estimate for just faith communities like this, not personal property, but faith communities, the estimate in the LA region is 170,000 acres of land is owned by faith communities. I don't know what it is statewide, but these are large numbers. From the nonprofit group LA Voice, they assist churches with property conversions, and they are gut-wrenching in their honesty. They're just calling it like it is. How many big buildings do you need sitting empty on the weekend? Come on, we could see this coming for decades in America, but now we're here. Do I need a huge sanctuary and a huge fellowship hall and a parochial school when I don't even offer school children classes anymore? Do I need a big sanctuary and a big fellowship hall when there's only 100 people in church now? Oh, it feels terrible to say out loud. And then also, people of the Spirit would recognize in this moment, the Spirit can help us do something new. We don't lose our mission as a church, we transition. When LA Voice talks about this, they say, this is why it makes good sense for Christians, people of faith. We have the land, we have underutilized space, we have properties in almost every city. We're located in high resource areas, and offering up our land reflects the mission and the moral vision of faith communities, repurposing portions of our assets. It's not a failure, it's an expansion. And it might be our next stages in Christianity. We have to live here and now. We have to address the reality, what people are experiencing, what they navigate when they walk around your conference. So the Northern California Conference is leading an initiative to end homelessness, and they're leading by leaning into the municipalities, the cities and counties, and what's happening. Well, then lean all the way in. Here's your headline from last month, October 8, in one of your plaster papers. The county supervisor is asking, how is this funding being spent? We are going to hold people accountable for outcomes. We estimate we spent $24 billion in services to people experiencing homelessness the last 5 years in California. Now I know you know some of this because it's a highly politically charged conversation. There has been a lot of critique. What did we get for $24 billion? Because the problem hasn't gone away. And visit any city council, the temperature is high on this topic if you're in a city council that has a large community of people experiencing homelessness. Add to that the Supreme Court ruling that I know most of you know about. Finally, in June of this last year, the Supreme Court ruled on Johnson versus Grants Pass in Oregon. Briefly, in Grants Pass, Oregon, folks, they were criminalizing homelessness, giving people tickets, sending them to jail if they were camping outside. The ACLU backed a lawsuit on behalf of those experiencing homelessness and said, you can't do that. You're violating their rights. Well, that is the case that percolated all to the Supreme Court. The complaint that the folks had in Grants Pass was, the caveat was, if there's a shelter bed, you have to go use the shelter bed. You can't sleep outside. The people experiencing homelessness said, yeah, we've been to that shelter. It's not a shelter. No. It's like a mission. It's like religion. They make you sign. You have to sign something. You have to sign a substance abuse agreement. You have to take Bible studies or go to chapel. That's not a shelter. That's a church of some kind. You can't call that shelter. The Supreme Court said, well, actually, we're going to go ahead and let municipalities set their codes and enforce their codes. That's what has fueled the conversation fresh again in our communities now. The Supreme Court decision. I was in my city hall 3 weeks ago until midnight because my city just passed an urgency ordinance making it illegal to camp outdoors. But so did a dozen other cities around my county. And if it hasn't happened here, it's coming here, right? We're doing that without opening up any more emergency shelter beds, by the way. So this is the only thing I knew how to say into the microphone in City Hall 3 weeks ago is, if we can pass an urgency ordinance making camping illegal, we can pass an urgency ordinance opening up more shelter space. Where do we think people experiencing homelessness shall go tomorrow? Ticket their tent, 24 hours to get out, or we'll take them to jail. This is the temperature in California and in our cities right now as you, Northern California Conference, step in and decide you're going to end homelessness in your region. Makes me smile. That's the backdrop. And I think that's why we also are a little upside down and like, how in the world are we going to solve all this if this is the backdrop? For all of us, I think the personal growth will be the hardest work we do. I will be my own worst enemy. My church members will be my own worst enemies in this conversation. We will all have to fight our own opinions, our own convictions about who's deserving and who's not. We'll wrestle theological and missional alignment. I speak from experience on that because of what we went through where I was pastoring, right? And frankly, when I resigned 3 years ago, I resigned out of frustration. People experiencing homelessness are using the lawn for their toilet. They're sleeping on the roof. They're breaking windows. They're tagging our big box truck that we delivered our food in, right? I was just getting frustrated. They put a padlock on our box truck, so we can't use our box truck to deliver food. On Wednesdays, we have food for 250 families. What are you doing locking up my truck? I said a few things I shouldn't have said that day. And then we cut the lock off the truck, rolled up the back, and we see what appeared to be a young adult's belongings. He'd been sleeping under the truck for a few weeks, but he just got confident one day and said, I might as well sleep inside the truck. And so it was his habitat. And I just said, why can't we solve this problem? And I went home and told my husband, I think I'm quitting my work. He's like, could you sit down first? Sit down. Sit down. What can I bring you? Can I rub your feet? Let's go get some dinner. What happened to you today? Like, why can't we solve this problem? We will do personal inner growth work first, friends. And join me in that. I'm still doing that work every day. We'll do the personal work. We'll begin our conversations. We will need to ask these questions. Yes, we have to learn our zip code. And yes, we have to meet our partners. You have partners all across your region already right now. So some prompts as we take an inventory. Do we own land? Do we have empty facilities? You can read on through the list. We own plenty of land, like I've already said. Some of it can be repurposed. Some of it can be sold, and those funds can fund operations, because everything we build, Stefan showed you a beautiful 146-ish unit complex for veterans, that needs an operational budget year after year after year. When developers build new things, they build that budget into a project. But for the rest of us out here in a community, every time I take a grant from the county, it gotta pencil it. There's never enough money for operations. Some of our land could be sold for operational purposes. Not all of it has to be land, by the way. I'm going to say a little bit more about that. We have rental property. Some of you own rental property, maybe in this room. If every Adventist property owner set aside 10% of their rental property to affordable housing, we could move the needle. What active ministries already exist in your churches? I hear Wairika has a fantastic food program. Anyone here from Wairika today? So the news of your food ministry ripples through down to the Southland. You're already known in your continuum of care. They know your name and they trust you. So you're positioned for something next. Maybe you are a food partner for the build-out on some transitional housing, or like a program I'm working on, 18 to 24-year-olds, they don't cook food. We got to bring food to their door. Right? Maybe Wairika's got something they could be doing there. Where are the contractors in our congregations and the builders? And who are the people who know the codes? Where are our behavioral health specialists? Who can join a board or a commission? When LA Voice says they can help congregations reimagine their use, it's because they really have done that with several congregations. I've got one of those in my city. Let me leave this up there while I'm chatting. St. Michael's congregation, church, school, fellowship hall, they turned all those school classrooms have become 48 units of housing now. And that's what LA Voice helps people do. By the way, they're available in your region too. They ask us that we do all this pre-development work, though, that we've looked through our menu of options, that we've gotten seriously about what it is we think we can do now. Yes, we're willing to reimagine things. Yes, we're willing to collaborate. Yes, we're willing to roll up our sleeves and partner. Yes, we will come alongside. Yes, yes, yes. There's a few policy nerds in our midst here today. Somebody needs to go to the websites that Stefan was mentioning. Start reading. Somebody needs to know what legal changes have come and how faith communities, according to new laws, we are able to leverage our own land without our hands tied anymore. They have made it so easy for us to make changes with our land. But if you don't have land, what else could happen, right? I mean, if I'm a tiny congregation, I can make hygiene kits just as much as any other group. Every nonprofit and every shelter needs hygiene kits. Every family moving into temporary housing needs move-in assistance. It's about $5,000. Mattresses, beds, household goods, kettles. Think of the things you would need to set up a house. Every family moving into temporary housing needs that. What if you don't have a building, but you have a parking lot? I am so excited for the first Adventist group that surrenders their parking lot. It's called Safe Park. Safe Park. They're scattered up and down the coast and up and into Oregon, where we simply open a parking lot, put a fence around, hire a security guard, make sure there's toilets, showers, food's coming, and the people sleeping in their cars, the children sleeping in vehicles with their custodial parents, have a safe place to sleep tonight. In my school district where I live and work, the two largest school districts, we have 3,000 children who sleep in vehicles every night while attempting to be young scholars the next morning. These children will have a 40% higher chance of being homeless adults unless we intervene now. Do you have a parking lot? We're coming for you, conference office. You have a parking lot. Every conference office in Union has how much asphalt do we have that we could turn into safe parks? You are 64 churches, 44 schools embedded in local communities, embodying the ministry of Jesus has never been so urgent and needed. And then I see all of you. I also thought this vision was crazy, but I'm getting on board. With permission, in my last few minutes, I want to share stories of the kinds of stories we learn when we decide we're going to help people. Gilberto is an example of what we know to be true. The number one cause of homelessness is a fracture in relationships. It can be a domestic partnership, it can be parents, grandparents kicked out of a home, it could be divorce, or it could be losing a job. Gilberto lost her job and then she moved to her car. But then she couldn't make her car payments, so she lost her car and moved to the park. And from the park, she stayed for 5 years in one of our city parks where we first met her. It takes a while to get your documents and to get connected to services. Today, Gilberto lives in shared housing. That's the newest, most affordable way in my expensive city for people to find housing. Brian simply tells you, he remembers one day saying, I'm just sick and tired of being sick and tired. Everything was going fine until it wasn't. Married, children, and then he turned to substances for comfort, and he lost marriage, children. And one year he woke up and said, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. And he accepted the social services that were offered to him. Today he is in what we call permanent supportive housing. If we have one documented disability, we qualify for supportive housing and the case management that comes once, twice, 3 times a month to make sure we stay housed. Michelle moved to this country because of violence in her home and her home country. We met her on the street selling flowers. One child with a learning disorder, 2 other older boys. She felt convicted, I got to provide for these kids. Try getting any other kind of job. Try applying for an apartment and housing when you have no documentation. And you're recovering from the traumas of where you've been. Michelle and her son are housed successfully today, and she can sustain the rental income. I have 5, 6 more stories I was going to tell you, but let me pause for a moment. Because when we decide we will step into the stories with other folks, this is what happens. They let us into their journey, and they change us as much as we change them, by the way. Come on, I am so greedy over all this. Every single day I am so blessed I can't stand it. When we decide we're going to do something real significant, we create space for many folks to live. And I want to show you a video from the Pacific Union. It's about 8 minutes long. This is property built, owned by the Pacific Union in Riverside, California, 80 units of housing.
We have a very special grand opening celebration to share with you today. Hi, I'm Connie Vanderman Jeffrey, and this is All God's People. On May 30, 2024, our production team went to Riverside, California, along with officers from the Pacific Union Conference, to celebrate the grand opening of Vista de la Sierra. Vista de la Sierra has transformed land owned by the Seventh-day Adventist Church into a beautiful 80-apartment affordable housing community in the La Sierra neighborhood of Riverside. This innovative housing community is the result of a partnership between National Core, Mercy House, and the Pacific Union Conference. Vista de la Sierra will serve individuals and families who earn 30 to 60% of the area median income. It was an inspiring and thrilling afternoon, and through this report, I hope you will sense how important this project is to the entire La Sierra community.
La Sierra University Church got involved with this project a few years ago when my predecessor, Pastor Chris Oberg, was looking around, surveying the property, and beginning to get a vision of having a community where people, our neighbors without homes, could have affordable housing.
This project has history from about 2012 when I asked Ted Benson, our former treasurer at the union, hey, there's a building for sale on the corner, Golden and Pierce, we should buy it. And Ted said, what do you want to do with that building? And I said, we want to make it a community center, but we don't have $3 million. Within a few months, I learned the union owned the building. I was sitting on the executive committee and I could see in the minutes of the meeting, oh, we own the building now. It was about 4 years later when I asked again, Ted Benson, what are you doing with the dirt? He said, what dirt? The dirt around your building. And Ted said, what do you have in mind? We were sitting up at Camp Cedar Falls. It was break from a board of trustees meeting. Ted and I moved over to the corner and I began to say how the mayor in Riverside was challenging the faith communities. Adventist Christians shouldn't be left out of this. Like, Ted, what are we going to do?
She approached the conference, and the university church got together with the union, and it just began to open up and opportunities happened.
And within a few months, the Pacific Union entered into a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with our nonprofit partner to turn this little parcel of land into a housing home, 80 units of affordable, attainable, supportive housing.
My name is Tony Mize, and I'm a Vice President of Acquisitions and Forward Planning for National Corps. And I want to welcome you to the grand opening of Vista de la Sierra.
At National Corps, we can't do this alone. I always say it takes a village of partners, and I am so happy to see so many partners here today.
Many of us were here almost 2 years ago when, for the groundbreaking, the ground was just starting to take shape. It's amazing what a couple years can do.
The Lord had a plan for this property, and in His time, He revealed it to us. The Lord has instructed us to care for those that are vulnerable, to clothe, to feed, to visit, to meet the need. Seeing so many organizations come together to do this small but mighty project has been very exciting for me personally, rewarding and humbling.
We need 2.5 million housing units by 2030. And out of that 2.5 million housing units, 1 million must go to those people who are homeless.
What a fantastic location for a child to grow up in. You can walk to school, the library, your family can go to the park together, you can hop on a bus into town. This is really, really an incredible location.
Well, you guys do a great job on social services and on that side, and you guys are eligible to apply. We can come with vouchers to and match for every unit you set aside as a No Place Like Home unit. We would match with a voucher to make that happen. And we had that partnership throughout the county to get, I think, last I checked, we were number 1 or number 2 in the entire state in securing No Place Like Home units.
In that journey is it's hard to get access to behavioral health care. You may have private, nice PPO insurance, and it's hard to get access to health care, especially behavioral health care. This model to bring care here is in alignment with our idea of right care, right place, right time. That someone doesn't have to go somewhere else, but they can get the supports they need where they live and not have to take the bus downtown to get access to that.
When I lived in Arlanza, my dad was a steel worker out in Fontana, Kaiser Steel. My mom, my stepmom, was in Thrifties up on Tyler. And, you know, a blue-collar family back then could afford to live here, could afford to live with some dignity. That's not the same anymore.
Hope Through Housing's goal is to transform lives and communities. And we do that by empowering our residents and giving them the skills and support they need to accomplish their dreams.
It's just such a blessing to be here. The place is nice, everybody's really professional, and they carry themselves well. The maintenance guys are good. I mean, everything just clicks here. It's really nice. I just want to thank everybody in the department, that made all this come together. I just really want to thank them because I'm still here. I mean, I got some health issues, but if I was on the streets, there's no way, man, that I would probably still be around. You know, it's just hard.
As a former resident of 4928 Hollyhock, the little house back here with the brown roof is where Theodore and I lived in 1967 and 1968 while attending La Sierra University. My husband and I never dreamed his vision for this property would finally become a reality. My husband's vision was to develop this property in providing a safe housing environment for families in the community. And I believe that this community here that has been built by partnerships, incredible partnerships, is a place where people can find wholeness again, and where that dignity that is innate in them can be fully realized and seen and experienced, and give them a future and a hope.
We just believe that we all get better. If us is sick, we're all sick. When one of us gets well, we all get well. We can't sit on the sidelines and watch the crisis of housing and homelessness just walk by us without participating. And so for me, and what I saw for Ted growing up in this neighborhood, his eyes just lit right up like, yes, this is what the church is supposed to be doing.
And here we stand today on this amazing property where families who prior to this time couldn't afford housing now have a place to live.
It's so beautiful. This is simply holding the hands of human siblings who need our help. And that's what you're attempting to do here. Congratulations, Northern California Conference, for stirring the conversation for a crazy, wild, wide-eyed dream. This morning as I left my hotel, those little doorknob signs that usually say do not disturb, mine said, dreaming big dreams. There you go. What great spiritual work. I'll be here cheering you on. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Chris. I think now you know and understand a little better when I said every time I meet with her, she inspires me, and she really has paved the way for opportunities for us here in Northern California. So thank you again so much for continuing to just lead us forward in this process. We're grateful for your participation here. John Sissel and John's going to be our moderator for questions. We're going to open up for some question and answers now. We're going to have Stefan, Chris, Dr. Woodson, and myself up here to address questions. So if you have any, please let John know, and we will be, or should we have a roving mic?
I think we'll do it, yeah, if we can do a roving mic.
There are 2 mics down there.
Oh, perfect. And I don't know did anyone fill out a card with a question? Okay, we'll just take, we'll trust you, we'll take some spontaneous questions.
Careful as you go. And just to give you a little time frame on what we're looking at here, we'll be doing the question and answer period, and we hope to end by about 5:15. And then we're going to be transitioning over to the fireside room where we have boxed lunches, boxed dinners for everybody. We will be starting to show a documentary at that point as well. If it's going to be too long for you to stick around, we understand. We do have the documentary loaded up onto our website, but we will be showing the documentary, and then the producer of that documentary is here with us today, and he will be answering questions for us after that event. So that's kind of our timeline, just to give you a heads up. Any questions? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question over here.
Perfect, all right.
So is there like a mix of models that you have for housing, like land trusts versus rentals versus somebody said on the video vouchers or something? Can you explain the differences in the models of housing?
There's a variety. Do you want to do it?
This one's not on yet. Number one. Go ahead.
We're waiting for this mic. I think hearing an answer from a municipality will be as interesting as from a provider. Because when we say project-based vouchers, we're usually meaning developers are given incentives to dedicate units for supportive housing in the county. That voucher goes to a provider like me. My team now comes out and provides the care for the people that move into that apartment, but that voucher turns into money to the developer. Counties get a certain amount of those every fiscal year, I believe. We always use all of ours up. So even right now, people who want to build in our region, there's a long line for project-based vouchers. But there are so many mixed models: land trust, community trust. You can today I could put my property in a community trust. When my spouse and I die, it will force our property to be used for affordable housing rather than just to be sold in the highest bid on the market. There's a variety of models. What do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, how much time do we have? So I don't want to go into too much detail. There's a lot of different models. I think for the most part, the biggest sources of funding that we look to are state, usually, and then some federal funding. Also, usually that includes some kind of local jurisdiction match. If you're not looking at sort of a model that uses those kind of funding sources, you're probably looking at a single-family housing model, or private landlords renting out to individuals that they know and they trust, or they're willing to take that risk.
For these large projects, there's stacked funding, I think is the language we could use. This is the video we showed you, that's approaching a $50 million development. Who's got $50 million? It cost the church nothing. It costs the Pacific Union nothing. In fact, the Pacific Union earns income on this arrangement. But there are stacked levels of funding that make large projects happen from the state, from local cities and municipalities, from counties. Sometimes private citizens participate. Now, if we're talking about small projects, the nonprofit teams that do these developments will tell you and I, if we're just looking at an acre of land or less, we're probably self-funding this. We're probably not getting the stacked funding with tax credits, et cetera.
And you could be looking at sort of a temporary shelter sort of model too. I mean, I think what we're talking about is a little bit more of the permanent housing model. But as Chris, you mentioned, sort of like just a safe parking model is something that doesn't cost anything. Like you said, just some tape, some security, and a safe place to sleep. So it can be sort of that rudimentary, or you can kind of go up from there, I would say.
We have another question over here.
Has anybody ever thought about making it an option on the tithe envelope for giving?
You got the conference president right here.
No, but now you've given us a good idea. Yeah.
That's right. There's another right there.
Careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
I was wondering, the Veterans Complex that you have in Sacramento County, or is it Sacramento County? Yeah. Was that a building that was already there and you just refurbished it, or was that something that was built from the ground up?
No, there's a whole story there. That site was actually a former Air Force base. So there was one building, and we added. So we actually did refurbish that building because it was such reinforced concrete. It was sort of has such a good thermal mass to it that it'd be a shame to tear it down. But we also added some new construction around there. So the 46 beds of transitional housing reused that old building, and then the other 100 units were new construction. So those are 3-story wood frame construction, yeah.
We have another question over here.
Chris, you mentioned that perhaps one of the first things and one of the biggest challenges we have is going to be to overcome preconceptions and models and the like. I'm aware that studies have shown not even quite 20% of the people that are homeless in our country became homeless because of addiction problems. But very many people become addicted or develop mental health problems because they become homeless. That is not what is believed in our culture. It's almost universal when I talk to people that they will say, well, they're out there because they're drug addicts. What has anybody here, or what have you seen effective so far in broadly educating or re-educating the public about the myths? I know we're going to talk about some myths, but perhaps some of the resources we need so that we don't keep using a sponge instead of shutting off the spigot. What could we do to substantially re-educate the public, and what has been working?
This is a beautiful question. Thank you, Pastor. I will tell you, when it was a long journey to put the neighborhood in La Sierra there, and it started with our own congregation. The first protests were from us. The first protests came from people working in the building on site. The rumor was we were going to house ex-cons and child molesters. And we've got an academy campus right across the street. What is Oberg thinking? Okay. So we are always our own first enemy here. Long journey talking about this out loud with congregation and Bible study, Bibles open, prayer. I found bringing people with lived expertise into the story changes everything. So we start bringing into the congregation people who are willing to share their story. Instead of a 30-second summary on a screen, I'm willing to come and sit with you and tell you what my journey has been like. And I can ask you, if you had no phone a friend, no funds, no bank account, no car, no place to sleep tonight, how long would it take you to solve that problem, right? And I can tell you from my own words, I found that to be the most effective. We brought out city leaders. The mayor came several times. We toured facilities. We rubbed shoulders. And then there comes some point when you absolutely just have to tell the truth and say to people, what you're saying right now is not truthful. It's not borne out in the literature and the research. So we're just going to have to stop it right now. Okay? We're not going to perpetuate these myths. I'm so happy we're looking at a film and a documentary in a little bit, because it'll probably fill out the answer some.
Chris, I was wondering about something specific. You mentioned in your presentation, or somebody mentioned LA, what was that organization?
LA Voice.
LA Voice. And it sounded to me like they had practical help to offer and advice to offer people who wanted to transition their spaces. Is that correct?
That's exactly what they do. They ask us to do the pre-development work, like know yourself really well before you call us.
Well, so theoretically, if a church had empty Sabbath school rooms, theoretically in the basement of their church, and they wanted to transition that space in a practical way, would that be some place where they could seek help theoretically?
Theoretically, yes. They have a partner office here in the Bay Area also. We'll be sharing that information with Joelle.
Okay, thanks.
Can I just say something too with what you said, Robert? And that's, one of the reasons of having this summit, and we said first annual, which means we'll have one every year, is to help our own people get an understanding and break some of the myths down. I was at a meeting at a certain place with a certain person that is well known, and just berated me about that we shouldn't be doing this. And because of their own experience of saying, every one of these people want to be out there, they don't want to have shelter. They don't want to have a house. They don't want to have a home. And so you can't help. I was just really floored to hear that. And so all I did was just to start talking. And I think it's just those one-on-one conversations. My blood was boiling, but I tried to keep calm. And I just said, and based on what do you have those statistics? Because here is what the latest studies have shown. Here is what here is what has happened. And that person started coming down and said, well, I've never heard that before. I didn't know that. And so it really does take each of us, when we are in a situation, to be armed with information for our own congregations, for our own neighbors, for our friends, whoever that is, to be armed with that information. And that's one of the reasons why we're having this summit, so that we can continue to learn. I mean, there's so much to learn. I've been learning about this for the last 5 years, and I'm still getting more and more information and saying, wow, I didn't know that, I didn't know that. But to get that information really helps us to have these discussions one-on-one and help educate our own people with these issues, especially the ideas, and you brought this up, Chris, the idea that as soon as we hear about, you know, setting up a housing, affordable housing, the first thing people say is our own people. Well, they go into not in my backyard, because right away they're saying, well, wait a minute, we've got to protect our kids, as though there's a connection between not being housed and being a child molester. Right away. This is what happened while there was an academy there, right? Well, we can't have a school nearby where there's affordable housing. So we really have to just have the information ourselves and just be, as they used to say, a committee of one and have that information.
With this example that Pastor Mark's giving, I just need to learn one line I can say in those moments and in those conversations. So I began saying, do you really believe we are less safe because somebody who was living outside is now living inside on the same street? But I can't say it with a smart attitude. I have to because this is not logical, it's emotional.
Yes, right.
So I'm going to say it again. Do you really believe we're less? Okay.
Right, yeah, good, yeah.
And to add to what Dr. Woodson was saying, on our website we are adding resources as we continue to come across them of things that we have been learning, we've been learning as a council, and a lot of the new latest research that's out there that's talking specifically about some of these issues. So keep checking our website as we continue to update that.
Our next question.
My question, I was homeless for 8.5 years, and now that God has taken me back in, I work very hard to take as many with me as I can. But some of the problems that I've faced with on a regular basis, almost a daily basis, I've met with people that they've lost their job, became living in their car got repossessed, you know, just like the video's shown, not really any different. And the person doesn't do drugs, not mentally disabled. He's just in a really hard way. Now, he was awarded housing, but it doesn't start till next March. The man's knowing that the weather is turning. He's like, is there anybody in your church that could let me sleep in their garage so I'd be out of the weather? Another problem is to have access to a mailbox. You can't get an ID, and you can't get housing without the ID. You can't do anything without your Social Security card. And to have anybody available to help these people navigate this, and then, well, where can I have it mailed to? Wham! As one person, I can only do so many things. I live in a house that belongs to someone else. I can't open up their mailbox to 100 people that I bring food to every week. But these are real problems, and it seems like everything is a projection of, well, next year. You know, they're hungry tonight, they're cold tonight, they're in the rain tonight. So what can we do to expedite?
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being willing to participate. I recognize one of the lines that I've been trying to use in this space has been, how can we feed the line while we continue to shorten the line? So I recognize that a lot of what we were talking about tonight was talking about how can we shorten that line and not so much emphasis on how can we feed the line immediately. And that's not something that we've leaned to in this space, but I know those are conversations that are happening. But thank you so much for bringing those thoughts forward to us. And I'll be willing to let anyone else answer as well.
Thank you for sharing sort of the personal experience of your friends and fellows. I mean, it definitely hurts my heart to hear it every time, and I get those phone calls usually, pretty frequently. So I am really excited for this initiative because I am looking forward to what our teams are going to think of and brainstorm and be able to sort of implement that can help maybe in the immediate term, but also to be part of that conversation with our elected officials to help advocate for expediting all of these necessary changes and improvements. I mean, as you can see from our slides, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time to get housing built. And faith communities are sort of just, one piece of the puzzle. We have assets that we can use, but really it's a whole system of housing production that really needs help and advocacy, pushing our local elected officials and policymakers towards saying yes to housing everywhere, and more of it and more quickly. Because that pipeline is going to take a few years to expand so that we can finally catch up with our housing deficit, and maybe a few years from now we'll be trending downwards, and we won't have to, we won't be telling people to wait 3 years for housing, 5 years for housing, 7 years on a wait list, that kind of thing. So I'm really excited about this initiative because we can lend our voice to that advocacy to help make those changes on the policy level.
More questions? And let me add a little bit to that. We hear you. Honestly, we hear you, right? And I think that this is one of the reasons why we have our guest panelists here to answer those questions and talk about that, because I really believe that the church has a unique opportunity to really fulfill the gospel of Christ. Exactly what you're saying, right? In terms of why are we waiting so long to do this and that when we got people who are in need right now? And this is the reason why the summit is going on right here, and this is the reason why that these groups of people are going to try to do something about this and hopefully expedite this in a much faster pace. Thank you for that.
What you're saying, Professor, I'm gonna, we got one more question there, but I wanna, could you tell me your name again? I didn't catch it. Scott, nice to meet you. Thank you for your bravery. I'm gonna say this out loud into a microphone. I learned once that a key to my church fellowship hall was kept in the pant pocket of one person experiencing homelessness in our community. I did not give him that key. I didn't know about that until after he passed. When he passed, the key was in his pocket. He was a guest at our church most weekends. I had no idea that a prior administrative pastor saw what you're talking about and said, when we get to the cold months, here, I'm just gonna slip you a key. And our church fellowship hall in a tiny little corner, I don't know who the code people are from municipalities here, but, because you have to have a temporary usage permit for this. Unless there's a state of an emergency. A state of emergency means, hey, just get the people indoors, right? There are possibilities because we have a lot of empty buildings. There are possibilities for cold weather months, and some people are listening to you tonight, so thank you for asking your question.
That's right. Our last questions.
Okay. So my really big concern has to do with a statistic that I did not see addressed in the foundational philosophy that was presented, and it was addressed slightly with Elder Oberg's talk at the very end. 50% of the women that are homeless, there is some type of domestic violence connection. And this is something that is really, really important to me because I've helped a lot of people that, and most of them women, that were trying to disconnect from a situation with what would be politely termed a high conflict person. And they were trying to get out of that, and what happens a lot of times is they lose their mental health, and I can speak from the experience of my sister. And that led her to being homeless. And the court system is a very hard system to navigate for this. And I think that in addressing the homelessness, the component of domestic violence needs to be very, very central. And emotional abuse is the largest aspect of that. People think of domestic violence as being somebody getting beaten up. But that is only the tip of the iceberg that people see, and that sometimes never happens in what we call in this country domestic violence. Some people are trying to change that terminology. But the biggest part has to do with emotional abuse, sometimes religious abuse, sometimes financial abuse, all these other things that are there. And those are the things that are usually happening within our church. And we have to be so much more knowledgeable about this. It is not enough to have a Sabbath once a year when somebody gets up and talks about domestic violence in the form that most people think about it as beating up somebody. But the emotional abuse that goes on, and that we help people to learn better communication skills, because sometimes that's a big aspect of it, and to learn conflict pivots and things like that, and that we are listening, observant when a dog whistle example of something happens in front of us, and most people don't even know what that is. But when we see something that doesn't seem like it fits the context of what was said between a couple, and we recognize that something must be wrong there, that we figure out a way to get help. And so we need to be doing this because it's not just domestic violence outside of our church. But like I said, my sister, within the context of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Thank you all for your great questions and comments. We have time for one more. I think I saw a hand right there. Well, let's do two really quick. All right. All right.
Please. Thank you so much. So I just want to say thank you all so much for putting this on. My question is for the ETI, I believe it was called, the task force. What is the process, just so we can get that going?
If you are in one of the counties that was not listed on the slide and would like to get started with the task force, please feel free to reach out to me and we can start those conversations. My email is joelle.chinick@nccsda.com. You can find me on our website or we can talk afterwards.
Thank you.
All right, last question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a little bias that when I speak only about Jesus' second coming. But this particular topic has always been a part of me and my wife. And when first time Pastor Woodson announced in Granite Bay Church that Adventist Church is going to do something, I could not control, but I went and on the stage and I congratulated him, and I was very happy. But what I want to say today is that as we plan and act on those plans, there is a situation where we need to prepare our church members as well for those people that, as he mentioned, that a homeless does not have a state ID, a driver's license. Why I'm saying state ID as well, because a homeless many times will not have something to drive. But we can take them to help them, but if they don't have an address, they cannot get it completed. I have worked with Scott about 8-9 years now, and by God's grace that he is no more homeless. And he has demonstrated that if God is holding his hand, he is putting his hand behind and pulling out other homeless people from there. And that's a great thing. And he has taught me a lot, and me and my wife, that we used to work with different churches because our Adventist church did not have a ministry like this.
But when we have, I want that if we can educate or at least bring in conversation to the church members that how can a single church member help somebody only by providing one person a postal address or something very, very small which will lead to successful work what you guys are doing.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Joelle, you'll tell us how we'll transition into the next part of our program.
Thank you all again so much for coming. We hope that you've learned, we hope that you've been inspired, we hope you have dreamed with us and see where we're headed in the future. We're going to take a break now as we transition over to the fireside room. You can use the restroom, get some water. Please feel free to join us. You're going to head out the main doors to the right. You'll head down the walkway there. We have, again, we said we have some boxed dinners for you. Please find a seat to sit down and start eating. And we hope to get the documentary going just as soon as possible so we can get everybody home. Thank you so much.